Yeah, so welcome all. So today we have Sandeep, who's Associate Technical Consultant at Argano, be joining in and delivering this particular session on adaptive cards and Copilot. And a warm welcome to all of you. So Sandeep, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bhargav. Let me share my presentation quickly. Yeah, I hope you all can see my screen. Can I get a confirmation?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, thank you. So let me start with my a quick introduction. Uh, I'm Sandeep. I'm based out of Hyderabad, Telangana. As Bhargav said, I have been working in. I'm working with Argano as associate technical consultant. At Argano, here we are a Microsoft Solutions partner and also an inner circle partner of Microsoft. I have been working for the last 1.5 years in the Microsoft Power Platform tech stack. I have been building products on most of the utilizing most of the tools on the Power Platform tool belt. Also been for the last couple of months, I have been trained into the Dynamics finance and operations, and I also been transitioning slowly into that technology as well. The QR code you see on my screen is a will redirect you to my LinkedIn profile. As you have made through this meeting, I understand that your passion through to Power Platform and Microsoft Tech Stack. So I would love to connect with you all. Please send out a LinkedIn request by scanning this QR code. And as I said, I have been also been doing some blogging and some evangelizing on Power Platform on the LinkedIn. Also, if there's any support that I can help you when you could reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I would love to help you all. Going forward, let me introduce the topic of today, which is enhancing the user experience in Copilots using adaptive cards. Before going forward, I thank in your Microsoft Tech community, the organizers Bhargav, Hanish, and Sujita for providing me this opportunity. So to talk on the today's topic, I would like to give you a quick background of how do I actually come across this adaptive cards, and how do I actually is it a random attempt to build out adaptive cards and utilize in Copilot? Definitely not. But how did I actually come across through adaptive cards and have built them is accordingly with my with the requirement that I was working in the when I was working through the Copilot Studio. As you all know, Copilot Studio under the tool belt of Power Platform. When I was working for a product, as I said, we are a Microsoft Solutions partner. Argano here at Argano, we also build IP products. One of our IP products, My Time Talks, My Time, which is an IP product, is is a tool that sits in the Microsoft Teams, and employees can submit their timesheets. We all know timesheets. We all know billing and all. So whoever uses Microsoft Finance and Operations for their project billing and timesheets, they can utilize this product MyTime by uh, simply conversing with the Copilot into their teams. Just they go to the teams and conversing to the with the Copilot. They can simply get done with their timesheets weekly. So while building that product, we come across a requirement of making the user experience simple and intuitive for the users when they submit their timesheets. Because actually, the user interface or the user experience with finance and operations is a little off, so that new users, when onboarded to that platform and start trying to timesheets, will definitely get confused a little bit. So to take out the complexity from for the user to experience, we built out adaptive cards and make the user experience intuitive in that Copilot. So that's how we can use our Copilots, our adaptive cards in Copilots to make the user to make a great user experience. So the agenda is quite simple today. We'll be spending a very less time on the introduction of the Copilot Studio and building blocks, but actually go into what adaptive cards are and why are we actually talking on adaptive cards today. And also we'll have a quick demo on how do we actually design it, where do we actually design it, and also we'll see in the live demonstration how do we uh, integrate this adaptive cards into the copilots so that users can see out a very engaging conversations within that copilot's conversation. And I'll leave some time after my presentation for the question and answers. So to introduce you to Copilot Studio, most of you all here have had or have already been using Copilot Studio. So a quick recap to Copilot Studio is it is the a go-to tool in the Power Platform to build out our own custom copilots. Today, if we go anywhere in the Microsoft ecosystem, not only limited to the business application platforms like finance and operations and Power Platform, but also on the Office 365 tools and Microsoft 365, we have copilots everywhere. So, but to build out our custom copilots, if the requirements come with a custom copilot, be it not only on the Microsoft ecosystem, we can also actually uh, make it available through different channels like Facebook, Slack, Teams, and all. So to build out our own custom copilots, we use Copilot Studio. This is our go-to tool on Microsoft Power Platform. Also, it's not just to build out custom copilots, but as you have heard all about the Microsoft 365 Copilot, which assists you in our uh, the Microsoft tools here and there. We can also extend what the capabilities of Microsoft 365 Copilot using the same Copilot Studio. So to build out custom copilots and to extend M365 copilots, it is the place where we do it. Also on Copilot Studio, we have channels where we can publish after developing a whole copilot in the Copilot Studio. We'd end of the day, we need to distribute it to the people. So where do we do that? In the channels in the Copilot Studio as well. So that's a simple introduction about Copilot Studio. And to give you a background on how do we actually build copilots in Copilot Studio, these are the building blocks of Copilot Studio. The first thing is the authoring canvas. Authoring canvas is the user interface where we go and actually build the components. What do I mean by components or Copilot components or chatbot components? They are like, let us say we have a Copilot or a chatbot. Actually, it's Power Virtual Agents previously, and today we are calling Power Virtual Agents as Copilot Studio, and chatbots are now being called as Copilot. They can actually use interchangeably. So coming back to the authoring canvas, it's the place where we build components. Components, let us say we have a copilot and we need to ask a question to the user. A question can be a component that we are looking for, or we would need a simple media file to display, or a very simple message or a greeting message to the user through Copilot. We'd go to the authoring canvas, and as this is all drag and drop here in Power Platform, we'll drag or we'll add the related component, be it a message, be it a media, be it asking questions. Those are the components, and the place where we build or the user interface where we build is called authoring canvas. Then what are topics? Topics are actual conversation paths for users. So when we start questioning or we start using Copilot, and it will lead us to navigate us to different conversation paths. It's always a fact that a Copilot can have multiple conversation paths because we would need our Copilot to assist in multiple things, not just a single thing, but answers different questions of users from that very own Copilot. So we would have different conversation paths. If you are a new user for an internet service provider and they are deploying or they are using a Copilot there in their website, if you go for and ask for what are the broadband plans, they would the Copilot would start actually the conversations related to the broadband plans. Or if you ask how do I make a payment, the Copilot actually starts the conversations related to the payment. So that conversation paths is what we call topics here in Copilot Studio. And what actually navigates us to the Copilot, navigates us to the topics or the conversation paths is called trigger phrases. So whatever the prompt that we are giving, and the Copilot captures the intent or the meaning that the user is asking for, and if it matches the trigger phrase that we trained our topics with, those are nothing but the trigger phrases. So they are an entry point for any topics or conversation paths. And then comes the notes. I have already explained you through an example, like when we are asking a question or when we are uh, just need to display images. They are components, and we make them we name them as nodes in Copilot Studio. So that's very simple about the Copilot Studio and what all we need to just get started with the Copilot Studio at least. Here all we haven't discussed adaptive cards at all in our building blocks, because even without adaptive cards things go good. But why are we actually discussing adaptive cards? Even with, as I said, even without adaptive cards, we can build copilots, we can have the conversation with the users and all. But why are we actually considering designing of adaptive cards, and what are actually these adaptive cards? Let's see. Let's see with an example actually. If I if I have we all have we are all developers and we developed a copilot and we distributed or we have actually shared the copilot for our users, for our end users, and it says this message and it displays when user opens our copilot and greets our copilot. Consider this is what, as you see on my screen, this is what our copilot's response. What is it saying? Hi there, I'm your friendly IT helper bot. Need a new laptop or having internet issues? I can help. So blah blah blah. So some text that it is giving, some para that is giving, so that our users need to go through this, need to understand what it is saying, and come to a conclusion. How do I actually respond to this copilot so to make things work for me? So they need to understand what are these what capabilities this copilot have, and how do I actually prompt it, or how do I actually question this copilot to make things done. So to make that user experience little bit better and also make it intuitive, if we have come up with an adaptive card, simple good looking adaptive card. It's not just adding upon icons, adding up some color text and all, but it is the user experience. It is the intuitiveness of how user uh, interacts with our copilot. So when we actually come up with a card and display few options, and now the user can see it, okay, and simply understand that okay, this copilot can help me in three ways. I can raise a new device request. I can also report an issue, and I can also track progress of my previous issues. They clicks that button, and again we can have the conversation go on continuing with adaptive cards or even with the a bare minimum messages as well. But this is how, and this is why we are considering adaptive cards and how it makes that intuitiveness in the conversations with users. And I hope that you all agree with me on that point. So to actually work with adaptive cards, you might be thinking, as these are UI centric or UI rich cards, you might be thinking there might be a need for the exposure to web technologies like HTML, CSS, or JavaScript, which is not true, because these are not at all related to the web technologies, or we don't need to have a minimum exposure on, but we just need to have the actual designer, and we can get things done with the adaptive cards. So these are the JSON formatted strings or JSON formatted files, we can say, which are adopted by different hosts. Actually, Microsoft, these adaptive cards are supported by every couple of hosts like Teams, Outlook, and there are other couple channels or mediums that are adaptive cards are supported currently. So we might also get going on forward. We might also get different platforms added as support for these adaptive cards or the hosts to adaptive cards. So as you look on the bottom, you might be seeing these are some UI rich adaptive cards. So when we develop these in the Copilot Studio, we design the adaptive cards, we develop a Copilot topics and all, and we actually have them published in the to the users, and the users can interact with these cards instead of reading a simple free text messages and all. They can interact with these cards. They are good looking, also they are interactive. So to work with adaptive cards, as I mentioned, There's no barrier of learning the web technologies and all. You just need to go to what, which is adaptive card designer. So we don't have the support of designing the adaptive card actually in directly into the Copilot Studio, but we have a Microsoft owned tool which is Adaptive Cards Designer. So today, this is all about what Copilot Studio is, why do we consider adaptive cards, and where do we design adaptive cards. And from now, we'll actually jump into the demonstration of how do we do uh, all this stuff. So let me quickly switch my tabs and share my teams. So you might be thinking why do I need Teams application here? Let's see. So this is how today we are demonstrating with a simple use case. I just don't want to start with or start some random adaptive cards or just inspire from the existing examples and do the same thing, but actually put you forward a use case that we can use. Let us consider a business desk. As you all know, we all have business desk in our very own organizations or the companies that we work in. They actually deal with the client contracts. Whatever we work for the client projects and all day in and day out, they are actually the the contracts that we do with the clients. And who deals with all of these client contracts and all is business desk. Let us say we are developing a copilot for them to manage different contracts. Let us say like if there are some invoices that are need to be sent but are pending somehow, they need to track down what are all those contracts uh, which are pending invoicing. And also after sending out the invoices to the clients, they might be pending at the point at client side. They can also get some so they need to get informed what are all the contracts that are pending payment from the client. So this is the simple use case that I considered today for our demonstration. Let us again greet our Copilot, which is Business Desk Copilot, and it actually provided me an adaptive card. So we'll all implement whatever we all have seen in the presentation. We'll all implement the same thing here in this Copilot. So when I greet it, it gave me an adaptive card. And when I click it as synopsis, let us see what it says. Okay, it again it gave me an adaptive card. Now with an overview of all the contracts, like there are some client contracts that are not started. There are 4 active contracts. There is 1 closed contract and 2 are on hold. Okay, so Business Desk knows when they click on synopsis, they might be giving a card of overview of on all the contracts. Let us again greet. We can also have the same card. We can do that. When I greet it, it again given me the which is we can see it as a home for this application or the Copilot. Let me click the pending invoice and see what it shows me. Okay, it gave me an adaptive card where it compiled a list of contracts that are pending invoice. So this shows like business desk, these are the contracts, these are the dates, these are the due dates that the contracts are are being pending for the invoice, and these are some contacts that point of contacts for the client. So this is how even if let us consider for a moment, if there is no support for adaptive cards, how do we actually display this? We actually have it in a simple message. How do we type a message and all in a Teams? It's the same free text that we can display this all the information, which is not at all in a readable format or also not at all intuitive for the user. So in the demonstration today, we'll implement the same. When I say hi again, let us see what it actually this buttons does, the pending payment. You might all be thinking, and again, an adaptive card now with the contracts pending payment, but it's not giving because we'll all implement the same thing. I haven't implemented yet, so we'll do the same. Like we'll implement the same card. How do we design it in adaptive cards? How do we put it in the topic of a Copilot Studio? And how do we ultimately get it into this bot? This is how we would be demonstrating today. Again, I'll switch my tabs to my browser. Bear with me. Yep. Yeah. Now I'm into the browser and now I'm into the Microsoft's Adaptive Card Designer. So here is the homepage of Adaptive Card Designer. where we implement all of these adaptive cards as you see in the teams. So all the adaptive cards been designed here and put it in our topics to make it available into the Copilot. Let us start building a new adaptive card so that we know how do we actually design it in the adaptive card designer. The first thing that we need to be considered is, as I've been saying, that there are some of the hosts that are that adaptive cards are supported in. One of them main channel is Teams. As you see, our Copilot today is now sitting in the Teams application actually. We need to focus on the target versions because different hosts will be supporting different versions of the adaptive cards, and on depending on the versions, the elements that we use on adaptive cards might change. So currently the Teams application is supporting the 1.5 version of adaptive cards. So when we switch into it, the here are on your left navigation, you could see some of the elements where you could use on the adaptive cards. As you see on our home adaptive card, where I'll just again jump into the Copilot or Copilot, and let us start building this card. How do we actually build adapt this card into this in the designer? As you see at the top, I have two columns. So I'll place a column set on that. And when I click here 2 times, it will add more columns. If I click 3 times, it will add another column, but I need 2 columns. I clicked 2 times and it added me the 2 columns. So on the 2 columns on the left side, what we are having on our card is an image. On the image, we had an icon where I can quickly bring some of the resource for a icon. Wrong icon, sorry. Let me see. Yep. Yes. So this
Yeah.
is the icon that.
Sandeep,
Yes,
one
Bhargav.
second. We will wait for any questions in the end because
Yep.
it might be taken over by events. So
Mhm.
I urge the participants to hold on to the questions to the end. And yeah, time check. You have 30 minutes more. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you. So here is how I added an icon. But it is very big in size. So when we are trying to add on different elements onto the adaptive card, the right side portion is where we can change the different properties of the component or the element that we added over to the adaptive card. So I just want a small in size, so I'll go to the right and make it a small. So that's what I need. So I'll keep it there. And then we have our Copilot name, which is Business Desk Copilot. Okay, now I just don't want this as a very simple text, but some styling, some sort of styling. I'll make it as medium, and on the vertical alignment, I make it as a center, and on our horizontal alignment, I'll make it as a what we say the right. Yep, keeping it this, and I'll also make it a little bolder so that they can see, and also the colors. So to also the point to remember here is the properties. On the property side, we don't have much properties like font and all. We only here in the adaptive cards, it only supports two types of fonts, which is basic and default and monospace, which is a monospace is like a typewriter font. So this is how we add elements, required elements to the adaptive card and make certain changes, required changes to the properties of each element on the adaptive card. And how do we actually make these action buttons as you see? Let me change again to this. Yeah, these action buttons. So when I am clicking out here, it is providing me some output on the Copilot. How do we do that? We can actually make use of action sets. So again, I'll have a column set and make it 3 columns because in a same row, I need a few buttons. I'll add action sets. After adding action sets, there are a couple of action sets, which is one is opening an URL. This action set actually goes, it looks like a button, a simple button. When clicked, it redirects us to a different web source that we provide in the URL property. And our required action set now for our card is action.submit. What does this do is it actually submits some data to return to the Copilot. So when we have some data, some information that we need in return from the user, be it some forms. A very great example is forms. If you need to collect some information from the user like name, phone number, address, and all, you have those elements, required elements over here. You see input dot text, input date, input time, and all. These are all the input elements, and these are all some display elements. You can think of like that. So when Copilot actually expects some user input, so some input from the user to be entered, and to capture that user input, we use action.submit. So actually we are using that, because in our adaptive card, when we see, whenever we click, if we click synopsis, actually the Copilot needs to know the user had clicked on synopsis. So we are expecting some input from the user through the Copilot. Again, on these other cards as well. So the Copilot needs to know it is the button pending invoice, and it needs to process the related actions in the backend. So I'll add the same as I have as you've seen me adding the action sets. After adding action sets, we all have added the submit actions. After adding the submit actions, we just need to rename it and make some other changes like synopsis, pending invoice, and then pending payment. Ignore my spelling mistakes. Yep. Once adding, as I said, there are different hosts that support these adaptive cards. If you want to, if we want to check on how different hosts renders these cards, we can just select our host app, host, and we can see how it actually displays in our target host. But this is not how I designed the adaptive card that you had seen in the Teams, but there are a couple of tweaks as well. So some properties might not be populated over here on the right side, but we might be searching into the JSON payload. To talk on this JSON payload, so when we are adding out components or the elements required on the adaptive card, the payload actually gets populated over here. So you see all the components, related properties, and all have been added into the payload editor. This is actually the way we communicate back. This is the adaptive card I need into the Copilot through this JSON. We all, end of the day, we all need this JSON payload. So going back to some properties, like this is the column, and on the column, if you see, this is the synopsis button. Go find out where is that entry. Here is the entry. So make it auto for the width. So it adjusts accordingly to that. AUTO. So this is how I made the card, and uh, this is how it displays in the Teams. Similar to this. Again, I have added another column and added those two extra buttons. But this is how we design adaptive cards in adaptive card designer. So I'll provide all the reference links at the last after the presentation. But let's quickly jump into the Copilot Studio and see it in practical. How do we actually use this? So there are uh, so this is all the new interface that a day back has been updated as part of the build, new announcements, and all. So coming to the topics, these are how there will be topics in the Copilot Studio, where some of the topics come by default, and we can also build out our custom topics. So for the very starting of our Copilot, we are displaying an adaptive card, which I configured through the greeting topic. We can customize also the out of the box topics. So here is how the adaptive cards is being placed over here. How do we do that? We go to the relevant topic, and from which the adaptive card should be triggered after the relevant trigger phrase has been captured, and go to the topic and add the ask with adaptive card action. Once you ask once you add the ask with adaptive code action, it actually expects a JSON payload to be placed over here. So we have designed an adaptive card. So already in our adaptive card designer. So copy over here, copy the payload over here, over there, and make it paste it over here, and see your adaptive card getting placed over here. So this is how I added an adaptive card. So what's the actually, there are actually two different actions related to adaptive cards. One is ask with adaptive card, and also there's another action where we can add adaptive cards, which is a message. A message in the different variations, we can add adaptive card as well. But what's the different actual difference between both? Asking with adaptive card is what is actually the way we make Copilot to know that we need some user input. So whenever you are asking the questions to the user, and the Copilot expects a response from the Copilot from the user through to Copilot, will add the ask with adaptive card action. So there's the other is message, adding adaptive card as a message. Adding adaptive card as a message is nothing but simply displaying a card as an information. So when we go back to our Copilot here we are asking the user which of the service or which of the action that you need to provide, that you need help for. So we're actually here expecting some response from the user, and thereby the Copilot does relevant actions. But over here, we are not expecting another input from a user. We are just displaying, we are compiling all the list, and we are displaying it on an adaptive card. So this is how we differentiate between these two adaptive cards. One is ask with adaptive cards, and also the uh, adding adaptive card as a message. This is quite simple. Designing adaptive cards here in the adaptive card designer, you have a design in mind. You put it over here by dragging out all the elements that you need, and making it adding as a ask with adaptive card as a question, or add as simply add as a message based upon the requirement. But what's actually complex here is compiling all the list. So actually, where is this data coming from? No, I'm not actually making it as a hard coded values and all, but actually I'm getting this all the data from a SharePoint list. So the data is sitting here in the SharePoint list, and the user is seeing whatever all the required filters and all. We have these buttons and all with the different actions. Once they click on that, all the processing is done by the Copilot, and it just simply provides you an adaptive card from this data source. Beat any data source, not just a Copilot. For making it simple, I have used the SharePoint, but beat any data source, we can use it. So the complex part as I'm talking is how do we actually compile all these lists when there is a collection of data, when there is an array of data, how do we compile it in an adaptive card is what makes it a bit complex. So what we do is we'll quickly jump into the overview. Okay, oh sorry, to the topics only, and let us investigate what we did for the pending invoice topic. So in this topic, as you see, there's no trigger phrases because we are actually triggering the topics based on the user clicking buttons. We could also do that with the trigger phrases. But when the relevant button is being clicked, so when it is pending invoice, so a Power Automate flow has been called. Let us see what does the flow do. So this is the Power Automate flow that is responsible for giving out the whole adaptive card payload. We generate like we only design it here, but we generate it whenever there's a requirement for compiling all the collection of data into an adaptive card. We actually need Power Automate to do that. So we'll go to the Power Automate. Let us see step by step. One thing, the the very starting thing that we did is we had initialized the two variables. One is var adaptive card and body. Why do we actually need two adaptive cards? Sorry, two variables here. Because if you see here, let me paste all the payload that we had or the design we had for the list. So here is our adaptive card. So when you have a design in mind, you go here and design this adaptive card. But the key thing that you need to do is here is to observe the payload carefully and decide on what is the static content and what is the content that is being dynamically put it into here, which is when you see carefully, this is all a static content. Like we have that card and we have those elements placed over there. But what is being dynamically we are getting it from our data source is this portion. How do we actually go and see from where this portion is starting and where this payload being starting for this dynamic content? Just by carefully observing it. So this is the column that is related to this one because we have this text business disk copilot, and that's this one. And then contract spending invoice is our header, and this doesn't change. We just need, if we are going with the another topic, we can just make it as payment so that it changes. So this doesn't change at all. And here is where all the content changes, because we are all generating this repeatedly for each of the entry that we are getting from our data source. Here in our case, a SharePoint list. So we'll go here and make that payload. We first we recognize that payload where we generate that dynamically for each entry that we are getting it from the external data source. We'll copy over all that syntax or the payload related to this what we designed. So what have we designed for our dynamic content is this one, and all this icons and this data. This keeps on changing for the each record. So copy that and make it available for the other variable. Let me also quickly jump into one of the slide that discusses this. Okay. Yeah, sorry, this been a yeah. Here is the payload. If you see in our card where we had some JSON payload at the bottom, so the marked, the green marked all the area is where we all have this our logo, title, and on the header and all. But the portion in the adaptive card, the payload in the adaptive card, which is marked as red, these are the records, the portion that is generated when we added our dynamic records over here. So once we create such adaptive cards, we need to carefully observe this payload and decide on which is being already there as a static content and which is being generated dynamically. So this simple exercise can make us aware of how do we do differentiate which is static and which is dynamic content into in the in actually the payload that we that generated in the adaptive card designer. So that's how we have come up with two different variables. One is for the a whole adaptive card and one is for populating all the body. And we are getting out all the contents from the SharePoint through our SharePoint action, which is get contracts with pending invoice. This is a SharePoint action where we are filtering out based upon the invoice status pending. So when a user clicks pending invoicing button, the Copilot understand that this is the button and it triggers out this Power Automate flow. And we know that we are looking out for pending invoicing. So it filter out the records with the pending invoice. And for each record, we are making out a loop and we are appending all the content, all the JSON payload that gets generated with each of this record over here. So we paste all the content that is generated over here, and we just need to make out our dynamic content from the SharePoint data source action. We are getting it from our previous action. So here, let's see. So here in this is we know that this is the contract title. Here we know that this is the due date, and here we know that this is the field for client contact. So that's where we plug in all the dynamic content from from this payload. Like we paste this and remove the static content and just plug in out our dynamic content. After making it out all records. So if we receive three records after filtering. So it repeats for 3 times and it creates the same payload as like here. So if we are getting three records, this this all payload which is being dynamically generated, it repeats 3 times and it creates and it binds 3 records onto this adaptive card. So that's how we iterate for each of the record that we are getting, and we are plugging in all the dynamic content into that into the body variable. Now what to do? Actually, we make a simple mistake over here. Why? Because we for each of the record we actually place it onto the adaptive card, onto this adaptive card. It actually generates the content and it separates each of the element by a simple comma. If it is done, this column set is done. After the column set there would be a comma, and then the next item starts. So if we have this column and we are adding another column, this is being ended with the comma, and then the other payload starts for the other elements. So for repeating all this content, we may end up with an extra comma for the last record, which breaks the syntax of the adaptive card. So what we should do is we need we shouldn't consider this last comma for the payload that is coming from this body variable. So what we do is we make use of PowerFX, the expression language over here, and only take the all the indexes from all the index from the starting unto the last but one index, so that we will leave that last comma. So once we take out all the required payload, we set up all the adaptive card in one place, which is our adaptive card variable. So now up till this point, we only have considered the dynamic content, where we generated all the content and plugged in all the variables related to the dynamic content, be it a client, the contract name, client contact, and due date. But now we will also need to include this, right? We all have this data into a variable called aware body, and again we have composed it, and so our required all the body data information is being stored here in a compose action. But later we all need the other header and all, right? Header and the logo and all. So make it, so copy the other payload that is remaining in the adaptive card designer and just plug in your compose action over here, because here is where all the actual body or actual records getting populated. After being done, all of this is done, we just need to return this variable as an output for the topic. So it comes as a variable, and it actually stores into this adaptive card uh, variable. Before actually, as we are displaying it as a message, we have added as a message, and we made it available as an adaptive card variable. But before we pass it on this variable to the message, as we are getting all the payload from the as an output variable from our Power Automate flow, before making it available to the message, we we actually again need an action called parse value, where what it does is we actually get as a string variable when we are getting all the payload, but it actually doesn't accepts the string variable into the adaptive card payload as a string into the message or ask with adaptive card. So what we do is we we push it this variable to the parse value, and also make this render as a record. How do we make it render as a record? We need to edit the schema, and we need to paste all the payload we designed it. Even if it is for one record or two records, we all need to copy this, and we need to go here and make it available as a from sample data. When this has been clicked, it it opens up a window to paste our content. So from this, it actually renders it as a record. We shouldn't actually go and select as a record or other data type, because it doesn't understand the way the payload is being generated from the Power Automate flow. So it's always advisable to go with the for sample data and provide a simple payload, be it one record or any other records, but provide that sample data so that it can render it as a record. Only once it is rendered as a record, we can make it available for the message node. So I'll go here. I'll I'll add a message node and I'll click on the adaptive card. Now, how do we actually add it here as an adaptive card? We are not going to add our all payload because this is only a design and we need to bind the data from the external source. We don't know how many records and all. We are actually getting all the adaptive card payload through a Power Automate flow. So as we are getting out through the Power Automate flow and is being stored in as a variable, we make use of that variable and make it available here. For that, you switch to the formula and use the topic dot and use our variable where our adaptive card is passed. You don't need, you shouldn't uh, refer to this variable because this is a string version of our all the JSON payload. But this is where the JSON payload has been recognized as a record and which accepts as an adaptive card by our adaptive card actions. So we need to refer this right variable when we are referring to our the adaptive card that is being passed as a record. So I'll go here and type it as topic.passed adaptive card and it recognizes and it pushes our adaptive card into the conversation. It pushes the adaptive card into our conversation. And again, why do I name it as topic dot? Because the local topics like local variables are being prefixed by topic and the global variables are prefixed by global. Uh, that's how it works in the variables. So when I say topic dot pass the adaptive card, here is how all the adaptive card payload is being set, and it recognizes as an adaptive card and it makes available in our Copilot conversations. So this is the complex part in the adaptive cards. We have seen how to add it as a message. We have seen how to add it as a asking with an adaptive card. But the complex part lies over here, where we design an adaptive when there is a compilation or a collection of list, you need to bind it over an adaptive card. This is how we do going that we had in mind and making it like observing it and studying the adaptive card payload and making it difference between what is all the static payload and what is all the dynamic payload that we need, and go to the topic, initiate a flow, you make use of the different variables, generate the payload, plug in all the dynamic content into the payload, and then return that. After returning that, you parse that value and pass it on to the messages adaptive card. This is a quick demonstration of how we do adaptive cards, how we design adaptive cards, how we make it available in the Copilot Studio, and by publishing, we'll also make it available in our target hosts, be it Teams or any other. So that's the end of my demonstration and quickly jump into the presentation now. Yep. I'll post it out after I end up speaking. I'll post out the references into the chat box, like the reference link to go to the Adaptive Card Designer or the Copilot Studio and all the other links. Also, a Microsoft Learn documentation on how do we design adaptive cards and all. There are also great samples over the designer tool as well. Now I'll leave the last 6 minutes for question and answers that you have.
Excellent. Thanks, Sandeep. So, guys, if you have any questions, please feel free one by one. If you have any, I think Sai, I remember you had your hands up. Is it taken over by events, or do you have the questions still that you want to post?
Thanks for the great demo, but it's very complex demonstration for a simple use case, right? That Copilot makes everything development process easy and uh, so that the business users can develop this themselves, right? Am I correct?
Yes, yeah, as if you've seen, there's the complex part over developing these adaptive cards and making it available is only when we have some collection of data. There's the part where we can actually, I have seen a GitHub Copilot developing all these adaptive card syntax and all. And the only complex part lies in where, how do we get the data from a Power Automate flow? And then how do we configure that in the topic? but adding a simple content like beat a message, you just need to some elements and you just need to add it as a message. That's simple. And even if you have some predefined buttons or action sets or action buttons, you can do that. Yes, this part is a bit complex when you have a dynamic data, that is list of data that you are getting from different data sources.
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to understand. I thought Copilot is very simple to use, and if you give the use case, it will give you 50% of the job. Rest of the 50% will taken care about the business users. So that's my impression is. But that's for the simple use case, a lot of complexity involved. That's what my impression is. Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
the Copilot in the Copilot Studio as well, it gives you uh, when you give a business use case, it will give you some template and it will start producing the topics that we need as per your business use case. But it might not be involving these adaptive cards, but as a simple free text messages and all created on by the Copilot.
Okay. Thanks.
I think this adaptive cards will be more focused on the UI part instead of if someone have a requirement and displaying something with a great UI with the logos and with a great UI and designs, then we can go with adaptive cards instead of like having a simple text message. That's what I believe.
Yep. Yes, Chandru.
Any other questions?
Yes, so I'm completely new to the Power Automate also. Okay, so my question may be silly. So now you have created the one flow in the Copilot. So you have created the list of flow in each flow to perform some action. You are calling the Power Automate flow. Okay,
Yes.
right? Okay, so just assume we are done with the Copilot flow creation. Okay. Now my next question is how you are going to deploy it. So and I want to see the created Copilot in the teams in the sense what is the next step we need to do.
Yes. Great question, Mani. So as I said, there are different channels that we can publish our Copilot to. So let's go to that menu. So this is the channels where we can make it available to different channels, be it Slack, Facebook. There might be different configurations for different channels because there
Mhm,
are different channels. There might be a different authentication systems and all, but there's some in front upfront configuration. There might be different for each channel. But if we see in our case, we are making it available to the teams application. So we
mhm,
can go to the channels, we can make it available to teams, and we can for those who have the power this license to for the Copilot, you can go to the availability options. There are two options. One, if you want this Copilot to make it available for everyone in the organization,
mhm,
that's we can't do directly as a developer into the power
mhm,
directly with the Power Platform privileges. But the
mhm,
admin who is making out the Teams admin, who is managing the Teams administration and all in your organization,
mhm,
they might be getting an approval. Like they might you might need approval from them to make it available for whole organization, or you just want to make it available for a group of users or a single or multiple users, you can go to
mhm,
the show to my teammates and shared users. If you have a
mhm,
security group, if you have a security group where you all have those users in that group, you can give that
mhm,
user group name or security group name,
mhm.
or you can
Okay.
actually enter out the name or email address of an individual user. So this is how
Okay.
you make it available to the different this is for the teams channel, but there might be different options for other channels.
Okay. So if I select one of my group name, so
Mhm.
in that group, so these things will be displayed as a chat window or how it will be appear. Actually, my need is we built the one Copilot. Okay, so
Okay.
I just want to add that Copilot as a one bot in the my teams. Okay,
Yes.
so
Let,
if I want to do that activity, what I need to do?
Yeah. So as you see, I have shared it to my own
Yeah.
own account. So
Okay.
I'll go to my teams. How do I
Mhm.
find this bot? Is go to the
Three dots.
application, go
Yeah.
to three dot and go get more apps, or you can
Mhm.
actually yeah, get more apps and then built with the Power Platform. So here is our bot sits. Here is where our custom Copilot sits when we publish it
Mhm.
to the teams.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I go
Fine.
hit here and add it to, yeah, it's already been added to my chart. So I only see
Mhm.
open button, but
Mhm.
if it's not there, you see an add button and it being added to the user's chat.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Sandeep. It's good.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other queries? Okay. So yeah, yes, Pranit. Just to quickly answer your query, yes, this recording will be available on the YouTube channel of IMTC. I will share the link in the chat so that you will be able to access that. So apart from that, I just wanted to mention Sandeep, great session, really very informative and a great walkthrough of all the technical know-how, deep diving into some of the key areas and also clarifying, taking time to clarify each of the confusions that anybody might have had and also answering all the queries. So it doesn't seem like you're doing your second attempt at delivering a technical session, but really good job. And thanks a lot for doing this. And I congratulate you as part of the India Microsoft Tech community.
One
Yeah,
last
great.
question, Bhargav. Sorry for that.
Yeah,
Sandeep,
yeah.
one last question is how this Copilot bot will differs from the regular bot.
Sorry, from the which bot?
So we before Copilot we used to have the multiple bots, right? So how the new Copilot bots differs from the existing bots? So what is the difference between the existing bots
Okay.
compares with the Copilot bot?
Okay. If what do you mean like on existing bots? What are you actually referring to, Money?
My question may be,
He's talking
are
about previously there was a bots before, right?
yes, yes.
Oh, okay.
Like chat
There's
bots or whatever,
actually
right?
simple. Yeah, there's only a branding change, Money. Previously, we call it as bots because bots are virtual agents. Because the
Mhm.
name of the tool actually is Power Virtual Agents in the Power Platform tools. So we call them as virtual agents and bots. But there is a naming change and the brand change in the with the tool. We are calling this the same Power Virtual Agents as now Copilot Studio. And as we are making it as copilots. So as we are calling all these chatbots terminology now to copilots, so they named it as a Copilot Studio. So the only difference that we can see is the new additional capabilities that these can do. One thing is we can also integrate the Azure AI. So Azure AI models from the Azure OpenAI service. So from Azure OpenAI service, today now copilots can make use of the artificial intelligence models as well, and it can read
Okay.
through some external data. It can look up to some external websites. It can look into the documents that you provide to kind of answer the user's questions. So that's the main difference that we can see from bots and copilots.
Okay, okay. Makes sense. Sandeep, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Does
Thank
the
you so
client
much.
started using this or just because doing all these things, extra licensing and all this thing, extra effort for the developers cost and all, like this really the clients are using it, is a great demand for these kind of things.
Uh, to my knowledge, yes, we are bringing out a lot of IP products within our own organization, and even if you see other organizations as well, they are building their IPs, and also they're not just IPs, but if you see. Many of them are coming up with the customized copilots because there might be some out-of-box copilots from different tools like different finance and operations and all, but they're still in demand for these custom copilots as well. Because actually the fusion teams, the concept of fusion teams comes over here. The developers, the functional consultants can do much of the part on the Power Platform, but there are certain things that developers do on Power Platform. So there's how the convergence comes with the fusion development teams. It's also some addition to the previous question that you asked.
Thanks.
Okay, so we are on the top of the earth. Yeah, thanks everybody for joining and making this a great technical session. Yeah, thank you all, and meet you again in the next month's IMTC call. Bye, everybody.
Thank you everyone
Thank
for
you.
joining today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barker.
Thank you, Sandeep. Bye.